Welcome to Seek Travel Ride. This is the podcast where we share the stories of people who have embarked on epic adventures by bike. From touring cyclists exploring the world to bikepackers tackling remote trails, each episode is packed with inspiration and tips to fuel your own cycling dreams. I'm super thrilled to announce a major milestone. Episode 100 is just around the corner. To celebrate, we've teamed up with our amazing show sponsor, Old Man Mountain, to bring you an exciting giveaway. Old Man Mountain racks are the ultimate gear solution for adventurers, designed to perform wherever your bike takes you. Whether you're on gravel trails or the open road, their commitment to quality makes them the perfect partner for Seek Travel Ride. And to celebrate our 100th episode milestone, they have donated an amazing prize consisting of 2 racks, 2 sets of panniers, a trunk bag and an Old Man Mountain fit kit. They will fit whichever bike you choose to take on your own adventure, and the giveaway is happening over at our Instagram. Make sure to check us out at Seek Travel Ride. You can find out all the details on how you can enter for your chance to win that amazing prize pack. Now let's get into the show and stoke your wanderlust for bike adventures. Okay, listeners, for today's episode, I am featuring Madeline Hoffmann. Madeline actually featured as guest for episode number 1, way back when I first released the podcast. And she's going to be sharing one day of her trip, which is going to take us to Bosnia. Now, if you've just discovered Seek Travel Ride and you're loving what you're hearing and you want to support the podcast out, the easiest way that you can do so is actually something that you can do free of charge, and that is to follow Seek Travel Ride on your podcast player app. It's the best way to support me. It helps more people discover the podcast, and it also ensures that you don't ever miss out on listening to these inspiring bike adventure stories. So hit pause on the podcast now, go into your podcast player, hit follow on your app, and help me to grow this community. Okay, today's episode, like I said, we're going to hear from Madeline Hoffmann, who's going to take us to one day of her trip, a day of unexpected happenings in Bosnia. Take it away, Madeline.
Hi, my name is Madeline Hoffmann, and I cycled from Germany to Australia. And I want to tell you about one day of my trip. And that one day takes me back to a day in Bosnia. I just took off from Mostar to cycle the Giro Trail, which is a remote trail in Bosnia and follows the old rail line. And I had my bike serviced in Mostar to get it all ready for this remote countryside. As I got more and more into remote territory, I had a problem with my bike. My bike didn't want to shift gears anymore. And at this stage, I was still not that experienced with a drop bar, as you call the bar my bicycle has. So I got stuck there and I wanted to investigate the problem. And in this moment, I was close to a small village. The village probably had 4 houses. So I was very lucky that I wasn't in completely remote territory. And I leaned my bike against the fence and tried to figure out what was happening before I then go into more remote areas. And in this moment, a man came out of the house and he said something in Croatian to me. And I looked at him and I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Can you speak English? I don't speak Croatian." And he looked at me and he replied with the most Western Sydney accent you can imagine. "Yeah, what's the problem?" And I just looked at him and I had the biggest grin on my face, as I myself am living in Sydney. So I was so lucky to run in this remote village into a person that spoke English and was actually living for the last 15 years in Sydney, Australia. I was so lucky because this man, Nikita was his name, he was just visiting his parents. He arrived literally 2 days before I got stuck there to visit his parents in this tiny village called Sirkoze. I told him about the problem with my bike, and I was in distress because I had no idea what was going on. I was uncertain when I could carry on with my journey. And he tried to calm me down. He gave me food. He gave me water. And as there was no bike shop close by, we tried to fix the problem ourselves. However, we weren't unable to fix the problem. And I got more and more worried about the state of my bike. But his parents were so warm and they took me in like their own daughter. The mom literally made food for me, and in the evening we watched some TV and she was knitting, and I showed her how I could knit, and I slept over at the family's house. And eventually we were able to fix the problem of my bike with a crazy dude. They say he's a bike freak. So the bike freak came, looked at my bike, we fixed the problem. And all up, it was such a heartwarming experience as these strangers took me into their house and they treated me like their own daughter. And his parents actually have visited Sydney a couple of times, so they knew about Australia. And even though we didn't share the same language, we were able to communicate with smiles and gestures. And we had a really lovely time and grew very close in this short time frame. And the next day, when it was time for my departure, we were hugging and the parents were almost crying at my departure. From then on, I carried on my journey. And while I was reflecting on this stay, and people always ask me, what is the name of your bike? You need a name for your bike. And I did have none. I thought my name for my bike is Sjekoze. So I named it after this Bosnian village where this guardian angel came to my help. And this is one day of my trip.
Thank you so much, Madeline, for sharing that incredible day from your journey and the little insight into how you came to calling your bike Sjekoze. Something that I especially love about this story is just, what were the chances? Like, seriously, listeners, what were the chances that you could have a mechanical like this in rural Bosnia, be at your wit's end wondering, how am I going to fix this? And then all of a sudden, there's a stranger who happens to be from the country that you live in, who speaks your language, who then happens to have a friend that is into bikes and can get you sorted. I just love how this turned out, and also loved how this also included a heartwarming overnight stay with this family that Madeline struck up a connection with. And now whenever she sees her bike, Sjekoze, she will forever remember this day. I love it. This is the type of stuff that bike adventures are all about. And listeners, I am absolutely thrilled and excited to announce that episode 100 is just a few days away. For those of you listening in real time, it will be on November the 30th, 2024. And drumroll please, da-da-da-da-da-da. Our guest for that show will be none other than Madeline Hoffmann. Yes, that's right. I interviewed Madeline for episode number 1, my very first guest, my very first interview, and she was really just partway through a mega journey then. So 100 episodes later, I'm super thrilled to say that I will be able to share Madeline's full story of how she returned from Turkey all the way back to Australia via the Middle East, Gulf region, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, India, Southeast Asia, and then Australia itself. It was an incredible journey from an incredible adventurer. So keep your eyes peeled out for that one to come. Now, as always, I especially like to give a big, heartfelt, warm thank you to those of you who have recently bought me a coffee. You are legends, honestly. I am always thrilled to see your messages come through with your donations as well, and to just see how inspired you've been by the podcast. I'd like to give a shout out to Mike, who said, "Like what I've heard thus far. It's been a great listen and diversion from US politics. Thanks a ton and keep up the good work. Enjoy your coffee." Thank you so much, Mike. I am a real world coffee lover, so I will definitely enjoy my next brew on you. And I'm more than happy everybody to be a great distraction as well. Paul Schneider says, "Hi Bella, thank you so much for your podcast. It has such great insights. I like your first question about the guest's first bike. I don't remember my bike, but I do remember my first successful ride. How glorious. For us touring nerds, it would also be great to get guest ideas about their bike choice, favourite gear, food tips, route planning tips, etc. Thanks, Paul." Well, Paul, I'm all there with you. Firstly, thanks for supporting me on the show, and I'm glad that it triggered you to think about what your first bike memory was. I often wonder how many listeners have done that after hearing that first question. And listeners, if you have, please get in touch with me and let me know. And Paul, all I can say is keep your eyes peeled. I've got some exciting ideas to come for future episodes, which will probably cover off on much of what you've been asking for. Thanks again for supporting me on the podcast. And listeners, if you would also like to do what the legends Mike and Paul have done and support the show by buying me a virtual coffee, I've included a link in the show notes. It keeps me caffeinated, and these lovely accompanying messages also keep me energized to keep producing these episodes for you week in, week out. Again, I'm super excited for episode 100. Until the next episode, I'm Bella Malloy. Thanks for listening. And that's a wrap on today's adventure. Before you head off, here's a final shout out to Old Man Mountain for supporting the podcast. If you're dreaming of a new bike adventure or mapping out your next big tour, you want to make sure your gear can keep up with you every pedal stroke of the way. Old Man Mountain racks are built to handle any terrain you choose, from rough off-road trails to smooth highways, giving you reliable, stable carrying power that frees you up to focus on your adventure. Check out their full range at oldmanmountain.com and start gearing up for wherever your next journey takes you.